What advice do you have for people who are going through something as difficult as that? You lived through that. So what would you say?
When you know that this is all going to end, you savor what you have. They didn't pay attention to the economics of things. They were just trying to grow at any cost.
Right.
Do whatever it takes, a lot of money.
Good for you.
It was a SaaS business that made 70% margins. It's unheard of.
And welcome back to Rise, Life Stories of Accomplished Individuals. Thank you again for joining me and my guest, Shane Neman. Shane, how you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
The premise of this podcast, as always, is to speak with accomplished individuals to understand their life path. I'm kind of going to forewarn you that I will, as politely as possible, interrupt you from time to time. And the reason is because when I sense that there's something I need to do a deep dive into,
sure,
to pull that value out of you, to be able to really dive into it, to explain to the audience, that I'm going to do it.
Okay.
But I'll be polite about it.
First of all, I'm very flattered that you think that I am an accomplished person because that's not how I really think about myself. But to the extent that I can help you or anyone else that's listening, I would love to.
Listen, I appreciate it. But that's very modest of you, because first of all, I've known you for 2 years.
Yes.
First of all. Second of all,
I think we met way before 2 years, though. We met in New York the first time.
You know what? I'm not sure if we did.
We did. We met at Gramercy Tavern at lunch.
We did. That's right. And we met with the same group of people that then we met again the second time. So yes. It's interesting because I was researching you. I went on your Instagram and there was a pinned post.
Yes.
And that pinned post is of a boat cruise, not a cruise, but we took a boat out.
Yes.
And that was the day that I had seen you the second time.
Sure.
And you said to me, "Oh, remember we met a few years back at Gramercy Tavern." So
you and Valeria were sitting next to me.
Yes.
Me and my wife.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes. And we went with our group of friends, with Max and Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. That was when we first arrived to Miami, and that was when Valeria and I think maybe a week after, we had said to each other, we're moving to Miami.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I still lived in New York City at that time.
So you came later.
Yeah, we had already decided to move, and we were moving within the year. I think this was like 2013.
Okay.
It's a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and I were just talking before the cameras turned on about how brave you are. You guys are expecting your third child.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is it and now you have a boy and you have a girl.
Yes.
And is it a secret who this kid
is?
is?
We're having another boy.
Another boy.
Yeah. So
Mazel tov.
Not what my wife wanted. I had no expectation. My wife wanted another girl, but we're just blessed to be having another one.
Congratulations, man. Look, that's awesome. So I'm going to dive into it. I've prepared your accolades here. It's on my phone. I've done some research.
Please don't embarrass me.
No, I'm not going to embarrass you. Come on.
Honestly.
Come on. You know me better than that.
Yeah.
So here we go, guys. I'm gonna go through your accolades. And you know what? The initial draft that I made, I had to shorten it significantly because then half of the episode would be me talking about all the stuff that you've done.
Oh, please.
So this is a very shortened list. Okay, so Shane Neman is an author, serial entrepreneur, and investor in technology, real estate, and hospitality. In 1999, he graduated from New York University with a degree in computer science. Following his internship at NASA Biology Labs and JFK Space Center, Shane enrolled in NYU Medical School, but left early to become a lead developer at a New York-based startup, creating the first blogging system before the word blog even existed.
Yeah.
Shortly afterwards, along with a group of school friends, Shane created Offix. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah,
Offix?
that's what we called it.
Mm-hmm. Which was an attempt to leverage computing and eliminate the need for IT staff for small to medium-sized businesses. The concept was too early to market, so Shane moved on to create Junebug, a $25 million annual revenue company with over 75 employees. Before there was Instagram, Facebook, MySpace, and Eventbrite, there was Junebug.
Or even camera phones. There were no camera phones really at that time.
I didn't even think of that. There were no camera phones at that time. You're right. So Junebug was a suite of event software, solutions, including, among many applications, email newsletters and e-ticketing systems. Junebug also produced large-scale events, executing over 300 events annually, with over 100,000 total attendees. In the mid 2000s, email open rates were diminishing rapidly. In response to this, Shane created Easy Texting, a web-based platform he designed and built to offer businesses a highly effective and affordable way to reach their customers. For 2 years, he simultaneously ran Junebug and Easy Texting until selling Junebug and channeling all of his attention to Easy Texting.
And money.
And money?
Yeah.
And making money, you mean?
No, all the money I had, I put into
all your
it.
attention and all your money.
I didn't do the VC route like a lot of people did.
You funded that yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Both times, actually.
Well, it worked out. By 2012, Easy Texting had over 50,000 customers and millions in annual revenue. When we get to that part chronologically, I really want to know how you managed 50,000 customers. I'd love to know the infrastructure for that. But
sure.
We'll get to that. In 2013, with the help of Morgan Stanley, Investor Growth Capital, and Multiplier Capital, Shane successfully sold Easy Texting. Shane is now a venture capitalist and backer of startups including Impossible Foods, Athletic Greens, and Sandbox AQ, to name only a few. He is a real estate investor and developer, managing a portfolio of 20 properties in major metropolitan cities across the United States, ranging from commercial shopping and industrial centers to large residential buildings. Shane's new book, Nightlife Lessons: How I Conquered the Business of Partying with Tech and a Glimpse into Its Future, is now available on Amazon.
Thank you.
Wow. I mean, look, that was very.
I don't know how you got all that information, but that's
listen.
pretty impressive.
But you know, I gotta say, like, when you get to, you and I are close in age. I'm a little older than you, but you know, when someone's been in business for as long as you have and as long as I have, that, you know, that tail of the tape is rather long. So I really had to cut it down for you, just, you know, for time. But I mean, you've been doing a lot. So take me back to, I want to get back to kind of your early life, and I want to understand kind of the circumstances under which kind of you came into this world, in the sense that, were your parents entrepreneurs?
So my parents were Iranian. Both my parents are deceased now, but they came in the late 70s during the Iranian Revolution. They're Iranian Jews. And so they left because...
You were born here?
I was born here. They purposefully left so that I would be born here as a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
In the late 70s. And they came with nothing. Classic immigrant story. You know, I remember my parents moved to Brooklyn. They had a really good life in Iran, right? Mm-hmm. As I was told. Yeah. And, you know, my father was an architect, my mother was a teacher, and they were, you know, upper middle class. They had just bought a BMW at that time. They left it in the airport. Wow. Took whatever suitcase and whatever they had, and just whatever little money they had, because the banks were closed at that time.
It took me in their stomach. Got it. It was literally like that. You were literally... I mean, your parents came in and you were born pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like a few months later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they came with nothing. My father couldn't be an architect because he'd have to go back to school to be an architect here. And they went into the textiles business, into like clothing. They opened a boutique in New York, and then he became a knitwear manufacturer later on, and also designed, I don't know if you remember, it was really in fashion, those colored rhinestone jean jackets that would say like New York or San Francisco, and they would use like, I forgot the technical term, was something screening. It was like a certain kind of...
Silk screening?
Silk screening. They would use like silk screening, exactly. So he kind of did that and built his own design fashion company, right? Okay. So actually coming back, so they came here. I remember we lived in Queens in a 1-bedroom studio apartment, and I slept at the foot of my parents' bed for, I don't know, until I was 10, probably. Wow. And then, you know, again, classic immigrant story, work hard,
go to school.
Well, my father was the breadwinner, so he his business got better and better over time, And then we moved to Long Island into a bigger house and a better school system and that kind of thing.
And you have siblings?
I don't. I'm the only one.
Oh, wow.
I'm the only one.
If it's not too personal, and if it is, just tell me it is. But was there a reason your parents didn't want to have more kids?
So, unfortunately, when I was around 11, my mom got pregnant and carried the baby to term. But the day of, my brother, I guess was to be brother,
Right.
didn't, was stillborn.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then my father passed away when I was 13, like 2 years after that.
Oh, wow.
Or a year after that, which was...
I didn't know about that. I didn't know that about you, Shane.
Yeah, that was a difficult time for sure.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that both your parents are deceased, and your mom?
So my mom passed about 5 years ago.
Okay.
But she was there for me. And I grew up with her. After that, after 13.
So you grew up in a scenario where you're on your own now. It's you and your mom.
Yes.
Your father was the breadwinner.
Yes.
How?
And my mom had to quickly figure it out. 100%. Okay. So she couldn't, at that time they were doing that clothing business that I was telling you about where, my father was doing everything pretty much. They had a few employees, but he was, doing sales, doing the design because he had the architectural background.
Yeah.
And she could obviously not do that. Right. And so she pivoted into real estate and struggled for a really long time.
But he left the business in her hands? Was he able to plan his succession, or did he die suddenly?
My father got stomach cancer and within two months passed.
Okay.
So there was really none of that happening at that point. So it was really kind of shocking and quick. And so there was he died at 44, which was crazy. And when I was my 44th birthday was a big birthday for me. Sure. Because that was the number for me always psychologically, being I got to get everything done that I really want to get done in my life before that, right? And so I think, everybody has that driving force in them, whatever it may be. And for me, that was that, because I realized, it could be taken away from you really quickly.
Yeah, that's something I've contemplated. I've been contemplating, especially once I entered my mid-40s in the last few years. It's definitely something that, I think... I think it's something when people get to a certain age, it's something we think about on a pretty regular basis. I don't know about you, but I think about it on a regular basis.
I do. Actually, I'm actually into Stoicism. So
me too.
And I discovered it a few years ago. And yes, as you get older, you really start contemplating your death, which I don't want to be morbid or anything about it. But for me, and a lot of people don't feel like this, but for me, it's a way of getting into the moment, because, when you know that this is all going to end, you savor what you have.
Do you ever think back to the times when you were in your 20s and 30s and remember the fact that you didn't ever think about death?
Never.
In your 20s and 30s, it never even crossed your mind.
No.
But there's something that happens, I think, when you enter into your, for me, it was mid 40s, even early 40s, I didn't think about it.
Yes. But
mid 40s, something switched. And there was a period of time for me, for a couple of years, that it was constant.
Sure.
There's a saying, and I'll probably get it wrong, and I want to know your opinion on it. It's something like a man or a person is kind of born twice. Once when they're actually born into the world.
Yes.
And the second time when they realize that they're not going to live forever, or something or that it's going to end.
100%. You have a different perspective. You have a shift in perspective.
Yeah, it's a different level for me. It's a different level of consciousness.
Sure.
And it's hard for me to explain this to my wife, who's much younger than me. Yeah. She doesn't get it yet.
I also think it's a consequence of having kids too.
Yeah.
So, you see your kids, you see how quickly things are going. You and I were just speaking about this, right? And you're like, oh, before I know it, your son, your daughter, your son is walking, is talking about college, going into, middle school, whatever it may be. And they're, it's going really fast. I think, it's cliche, but time does go much faster as you get older.
I'm trying to slow it down. For myself, mentally, I try to live my life to actually slow that down. And I find that when I'm conscious about it, it's actually working.
It is. I mean, I try and wake up earlier to make it slow down. So I have more awake time. Yeah. But it's a struggle. Listen, also, at this age, I'm 46. So stuff starts to hurt.
Dude, stop.
You
You're
know?
like the most fit. You're one of the most fit people, regardless of age, that I know. And I remember when I
thank
first
you.
met you and you started telling me about your diet and your regimen and stuff, it actually inspired me to work out. Because 2 years ago, I met you and I
Yeah.
saw that you were a couple of years younger than me.
Yeah.
And anybody who follows me on Instagram sees how much I work
Yeah,
out.
I follow you. I watch you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to get to the gym.
But what's funny is that I started doing that because when I saw you, I was like, I can step things up because, you
Great.
were
I'm
that
happy
example.
I could help in that way.
Well, I'm happy now if you're following me on
yeah.
Instagram that you want to go to the gym more.
No, it's funny because I know you go at like 5 a.m, which is impressive.
So I get there at 6, yeah.
So that means you wake up at 5 and
Yeah.
you got to like get ready and, drive there and everything like that.
For sure.
I have no excuse. My gym is right here in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
building. So I could just go down the elevator and go, which I do. But in any case, I wasn't always like that. I think also part of, I kind of got into fitness
Yeah.
about right after like 5 or 6 years ago when my son was born. And
That was the catalyst, right? 'Cause
yeah,
you-
for sure.
Yeah, for me
And
too.
I was kind of out of shape.
Yeah.
I wasn't like obese, right? But I wasn't in shape. And so
I want to go back. Sorry, I want to go back to your youth because
yes.
to have gone from losing your dad at 13
Yeah.
to now, first of all, I mean, those 2 months from the diagnosis to his passing
Yeah.
for such a young man, like such a young mind
Yeah.
at the age of 13. I mean, I remember myself at 13.
Sure.
That, would you say that caused you to grow up real quick? Like real quick?
Listen, it's hard to say. It was such a long time ago, right? And I don't remember my mindset exactly then, but I do remember, first of all, being lucky that my mom was still around and my mom and my grandparents were still around, and I had a large extended family that kind of came around us and didn't let us kind of be lonely or sad and that kind of thing. I was obviously devastated because losing your dad, no matter what, no matter who's around, no one can replace your dad. So I think what happened with me was I was sad, but I was driven.
Yeah.
And some people get sad and lose hope. And for me, I don't know whether it's my personality type, whether it was I saw my mom. My mom's story is even crazier. I mean, she was sick. She was sick her entire life. Actually, she had 4 kidney transplants her entire life, and she had she was one of the first kids ever in the United States to get a kidney transplant when she was like 12. So they came from Iran to the United States back then to get her kidney transplant.
They didn't have that kind of, I guess, they didn't offer that in Iran back then.
Well, no, they didn't offer it anywhere. It was like in the 60s, right?
Right.
And so it was experimental at that time.
Yeah.
And so I saw the fight in her, right? The tenacity, the not letting anything, this is this cliche thing that they say about founders, right? Like a founder sees a brick wall, they either try and jump over it, go around it, and if they can't do anything like that, they smash through it.
Yeah.
And so she was that, really. She was the one, sickness. I mean, she was widowed at a very young age.
Yeah.
I mean, just some impossible scenarios for her.
Do you remember, I want to talk about your mom a little bit more, but before we do you remember your dad being, I mean, you were really young, but do you remember him being somewhat of a mentor to you? Do you remember him teaching you this is the way things are done as an entrepreneur? These are the things that we have to do.
I think he taught me through their actions. So my parents had their setup in our house. So we lived in a big house in Long Island, and they turned the basement into like a factory.
Okay.
And they would stay up till like 3 a.m, like doing these rhinestones and painting, and they had this whole closet full of like paints and all this other stuff, and they hired other people to come there, and they were scrappy, right?
Yeah.
And I remember falling asleep in the basement at midnight watching them work till 3 a.m.
How much of a contributor to the mindset that you had, how much of a contributor to the mindset that you had to become an entrepreneur and to become successful and to work as hard as you have and as you do, how much of that was formed, do you think, in that early stage of your life, seeing your parents work the way that they did?
I think it normalized it for me, for sure. It was just like, that's what you do. It wasn't like an option. But my path later was, I think, that wasn't the path I thought I was going to take, if you know what I mean. When I got into high
entrepreneurial
school.
path.
Yeah, I actually went to med school after college.
I know you. Yeah.
So I thought I was going to become a doctor, and for various reasons, including my mother's sickness and my dad passing young, I thought that was like the most noble, important thing you could possibly ever do, is be a doctor. And my path didn't go that way, but I worked really hard to get to that point.
I want to get into that, because that was also part of the research, and I saw that you had actually left medical school because you were so enamored by the .com, like the tech boom in the late 90s. But before we get to that, hold on a second. I had a thought what I was going to say. So I just wanted to tell you that since I've met you, I never knew this story about you, and you give off a confidence and you give off this like kind of air that I actually thought you came from money.
No,
I know. No, I understand. I understand now that you didn't, but it's just interesting. And I guess what I'm trying to deduce, and again, I'm just trying to create this value so people watching, is that circumstance. So, when you meet people who are like in their, let's say, 40s and 50s, typically you kind of have an opinion of them, right? You think, okay, they either came from money or they didn't come from money. But here's the thing, that people who actually come from money, people who appear to have come from money, more times than not, they have a story similar to yours where they've endured extreme hardships early in life.
Yes.
So they have this calm demeanor about them later in life once they've accomplished things on their own. And that's what you have.
I think it's been like, I've been through so much crazy shit that, not a lot phases me anymore.
Right.
Right. And at the end, I was always able to make everything okay with, various different things: hard work, my network, my intellect, whatever it is, whatever tool I could use. I never saw like quitting as an option.
Right.
And I was actually talking about this to someone else recently. When you don't think quitting or losing is an option, then you always figure it out, because that's just not an option. So if you don't have the mentality where failure or losing or quitting is an option, right, then you find alternate options that may not be the most ideal option, but you get through it. And time is the thing that fixes everything, pretty much.
So you went. So you're with your mom. You said your mom had to pivot. She went into real estate. She became a broker.
She became a broker and like a landlord in really bad areas.
Right.
And she was this like small spattered woman who would go into these really bad neighborhoods, and she had to start somewhere, so she bought the cheapest stuff that she can find, and she ran that, and grew it.
And were you shadowing her a lot during that time?
I wasn't. I was really studying. She wanted me to study, and I really wanted to be a doctor, like I said.
Right.
So I didn't get really great grades until, let's say, like 9th or 10th grade, when I went to go see my guidance counselor, and they told me that I should be applying to like community college because I have mostly B's and C's.
Right.
And like that image of myself was not in my head. And I was doing that without studying. So I came to the realization that like I need to shape up right now, or I'm not going to get into a school that I thought I would get into or imagine myself going to. And so I think it was 10th grade is when I started really studying hard. And, I shifted from B's to C's to really pretty much straight A's, and like going into like AP classes, which are like college level classes later on. But what I did do is I watched my wife, my mom, go through the struggle, do this, go through a lot of hardships of the ups and downs of this business that she was in. And then, when I was in my sophomore year of college, she suffered a stroke, actually, which then I had to take everything over.
How are you able to, sorry, hold on a sec. How are you able to do that? Okay, so first of all, before we get to your sophomore year of college when this happened with your mom, during this time where she's trying to provide for you, you're in school.
Yes.
She's lost her husband, so she doesn't have kind of the main breadwinner. So
100.
she has to become that main breadwinner.
Yes.
That sounds like that sounds very hard.
Yes, it was very hard. And we kind of had to hold back a little, during that time until she could make enough money. I think she was just barely making the mortgage payments for our house.
For you growing up and seeing her struggle in that way, like that must have been really difficult to see your mom. Like you love your mom. Like,
it was difficult. It was difficult. There was I would see my mom be nervous, and believe it or not, back then she would smoke, and I would be like, "What are you doing?" She's like, pulling her hair out because like some problem went on or the other thing, and I'm like, "You shouldn't be smoking." Like it was like, it was definitely a struggle, but again, I was trying to focus myself, like. Working was my focus and escape. Some people find their escape in other things that are not as constructive, right? They go into drugs, they go into alcohol, they go into doing bad things or whatever. Thankfully, I had the infrastructure and the family and the, I don't know, I guess, predisposition to doing that.
Let me ask you something. This is an extreme. I see this as an extreme situation. Like, it's an extreme situation. It's now normalized to you because you lived through it and you got out of it, great. And it was like obviously a very happy ending.
Yeah.
But that's an extreme situation. And I think a lot of people are facing situations, maybe not as extreme,
Yes.
or maybe they are,
Sure.
I'm not sure. What advice do you have for people who are going through something as difficult as that? You lived through that. So what would you say?
I mean, I think, what advice can I give you that you haven't heard that isn't cliche? I mean, what I'm going to tell you, put one foot in front of the other. I mean, these are kind of like, they're cliche, but it's true to a degree. But I think what you need to do is really have hope. And if you can always have hope and realize that this too will pass over time, and it might be long periods of times, you have to have patience.
Hope is one thing. How do you get past the despair? Because there are times when people go through real despair where they don't have hope because they don't see any way out. They don't see how it's going to turn around. What would you tell them how to navigate that?
I never felt that, honestly. So it's hard for me to give advice for something I've never done. I always kind of had this thing inside of me being like, it's okay, I can figure it out. Like if my parents figured out how to come from Iran with nothing, if my mom figured out how to, live with this kidney failure that she had, if, and live, like if we're making it after my father passed, and, if I can turn around my grades, if I could do, like I always thought that there was a way through stuff. And again, I don't know if that's just who I am internally, intrinsically, or it's a product of my environment. But if you are feeling like that, I think you should put yourself around people who are those types of people who will push through and not be in despair and hopeful. I mean, that's probably the best advice I could give you. Or, follow people on Instagram that are like that. And, I mean, I don't know if that's your solution, but
listen, I think that for you have kind of this built-in strength from what it sounds like. Look, I came up under difficult circumstances. They were very, it's not like a contest whose situation was more difficult, but what you're talking about is an extreme situation. To lose your father so young and to, see your mother struggle and to then do all of the things that you needed to do, it's difficult. And I think that kind of that pressure may have kind of forged the personality that you needed to have and the traits that you needed to have in order to push through that.
Yeah, I think it's bi-directional, right? You can take two directions. You can take what's bad happens to you that's bad and say, woe is me, I'm the victim, and have that victim mentality.
Yeah.
Or say, okay, this really sucks. You know, you go through your grief period, but it's time to move on and it's time to take the next step. So how do you go in that direction versus the other direction? I mean, people have various different methods of doing that. Some people are intrinsically like that, like I said.
Yeah.
Some people go through counseling. Some people look at mentors. Some people never go back into that direction. They go down the thing of despair. Unfortunately, probably now people are using medication to do this, right? You know, if you're depressed or, you know, whatever it may be.
I think there's a bigger problem today.
Yeah.
I think I want to stick to your story, but just as a quick, just to quickly mention it, what's going on today, I think, look, there's clearly people dealing with stuff through drugs and through various types of addictions and bad behaviors.
Sure.
But I also feel that, you know, with social media, it's a double-edged sword. So there's a lot of positives with the technology behind social media and communication at scale, but there's a lot of negativity as well. And I think
100%.
that tuning into, like, not filtering your social media and not like being careful of what you consume, I think it so dramatically puts people in a really bad situation.
I'm scared of how I'm going to control that for my kids eventually when they get it.
That's a whole other topic, and that's a very serious problem. Like, I monitor my kids as much as I can, but the problem is the technology seeps through from everywhere, and the screens are always there.
TikTok, you know, my daughter's 9 years old and telling me about her friends that are on TikTok.
No, it's
and you know, so it's interesting. Even if you look at my social media, right? Like, and I tend to not only put the positive stuff there too. I try to be as real as I can. You know, you're just seeing these like glimpses of, you know, of my life that is, it's like, it's like packaged nicely for you to see it, but like it's sort of real, but it's not real, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know what amount of work and time and suffering and bullshit that you had to go through to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, look, but social media became scale when you were already kind of established, right?
Yes.
So what a lot of young people are doing now is they're actually documenting that path.
Struggle.
Yeah. And that's
inspirational.
I'm seeing more of that. And I'm seeing the internet and just like social media become more real and not just the highlights. Where in the early days that was the problem because it was this unrealistic.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that kind of stuff is positive and it's real and you get to see, you know, the struggle. Which is
I think Valeria's good at it. Valeria's always talking about, but you know what, I don't want to get too far into it because I want to get back to your story, but like with us, we're always going through this thing where it's all relative. So when Valeria talks about any struggle she's having, she's like, yeah, but you married an older guy who's rich and you don't have to worry about this. And so it's relative. So I mean, to the 100%. Person who can't pay rent next month, compared to Valeria's struggle, it's a different thing. But
everybody has their own struggles, man.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about your senior year. So your mom got very sick.
Yeah. So my sophomore year. So I went to NYU.
Your sophomore year. Okay.
Yeah, and I lived close to my mom. So like my mom was still living in Long Island, and I was living in Manhattan during that time, going to college, and I mean, I don't know how to say it more bluntly, but she suddenly had a stroke. She got paralyzed on the left side. I mean, she was in the...
How old were you?
So 20. Right, that would have been 20.
7 years after your father passed.
Yeah. And so she was in the hospital for like a year. Really.
Wow.
It was a massive stroke. And, she wasn't conscious for a few months. So like, and I had to go to school. Like I continued with college, right? And I was on a pre-med track just because like still in sophomore year, you still have to, pre-med track is like a set of courses that you have to take that are prerequisites to get into medical school. Your major is something different. My major was computer science, which is a different thing.
Right.
And I was mainly doing computer science just in case I didn't get into medical school, I could get a job, essentially. Anyway, it was that was probably the lowest point at that point, where I was going to college. My mom was in the hospital in Long Island. I moved back to Long Island because I couldn't stay in the city and do that. And I had to somehow reverse engineer her business that was not computerized.
Right.
You know, she was not, my mom had at most like a high school education, and she taught like, she had gone to like an English speaking school. So she was teaching English.
Yeah.
Right. But she had everything on like pen and paper, and you have to understand this is like 26 years ago. Right. So like most people didn't have things on computers at that point. And so, I had by the way, I had like no idea how any of it worked. I didn't even know the addresses of her properties, nothing.
How were you able to do this?
I don't know. I know like it came out of a need. Like there was no option not to do it. Right. And when you have no options, you figure it out.
Let me ask you, have you kind of, are you conscious of the fact that you've succeeded in situations where your back was against the wall and you had no choice?
Yes, and that actually ended up being one of the reasons why I succeeded. One of the main reasons why I succeeded later on in some of these other businesses.
And that's what I'm getting to is, have you since realizing that these kind of no way out situations are what leads to high accomplishments? Have you put yourself in these situations where there's no turning back, where your back's against the wall?
Well, we're having another child, 100%.
Well, but that's a pleasure. That's not, I'm talking about like in business or like.
Yes. Well, listen, I think, I don't think anyone really chooses that for themselves. I think it's just a product of being an entrepreneur and doing things that, no one else is willing to do. Right. It's hard. It sucks. Like people glamorize being an entrepreneur and doing tech and all this other stuff. And you see celebrities, and now maybe you see even me, doing that, right? Like investing in Sandbox and Figure AI and all these other like sexy things that are, doing well and interesting. But the reality is it's like really gritty. It's a psychological warfare type of thing, right? You don't necessarily need to be the smartest person in the room. You need to be the one who can withstand the most bullshit.
We had an exchange recently, you and I. You probably don't remember. So I also invested in Sandbox. You presented me with that opportunity, and I invested into it. And I think I saw you a year after that or something like that. And I said, Shane, how's it? How's the investment going? And you said, oh, it's shit now. I mean, because the whole industry is shit, not the company, but like the whole industry. And the way you were so blunt about it, and it's like it is. Yeah, it is. You weren't trying to sugarcoat it for me to try to like save my, I guess maybe get me less stressed. I'm less stressed. I wasn't stressed about it.
No, I mean I want you to invest again.
Yeah, of course. So like, but I loved your candidness, because coming from an entrepreneur who's used to struggle and who's used to things going bad and good and up and down. And you, I guess, felt that I would understand that, so you didn't sugarcoat it for me. You're like, it's right now. It's not doing well. The whole market's down. And it is what it is.
But the company itself is doing really well.
I'm sure.
But the overall market, it's not doing well.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm in it for the long run anyway, so it doesn't.
Listen, this is an interesting time because I think and a lot of venture capitalists are going to see this, is that you're going to see a lot of those companies that were funded during COVID and the mayhem and craziness that was going to happen, is that those guys have never really come to situations that are now where they can't raise money and their back's against the wall and they need to be scrappy and not spend money and shift their entire mindset of how running a business works, right? Like I ran a business from a perspective of, this is my career, I need to make money.
Yeah.
Other people that, for the last, I don't know, let's even just say 15, 20 years of this VC bubble, or you want to call it, or whatever, they didn't get, pay attention to the economics of things. They were just trying to grow at any cost, do whatever it takes, and just we're like, oh, we'll just raise more money when we get to that point, right? And that's not going to fly. In my opinion, I think the next 10 years or so, 5 years, that kind of thing's not going to fly.
So I think you're right. You know, it's interesting that you bring that up. So for me, I've been I think a similar mindset to you, that any business that I've created or been involved with in any way, it's always been about the fundamentals and about driving profitability, and at the same time trying to scale. So you're basically building something, trying to make it profitable, so you can, you know, if you're the entrepreneur, and if it's something that you're relying on, it self-sustains and it's paying you something, so you can, you know, continue to live and whatnot. So I've always done that, but for me, I've always had this like kind of this conflict then talking to certain people who are like, yeah, I have this business and it's doing X amount of, you know, whatever, millions of dollars a month in revenue, and we're losing like 30% a month.
It's worth zero.
And it's, you know, no, but it's not, because these guys end up selling it and cashing out for hundreds of millions of dollars.
It might be in a rare case worth something to a strategic or something like that. But I think that those days, at least for the next short period of years, will likely go away. I mean, they've never really come into an environment where it makes more sense to put your money in a savings account than to invest it.
True.
So it's a very, you know, like it takes a while for things to shift and mental models to shift. And, you know, this is my prediction. I'm not the only one saying this, and I'm not the originator of this idea. There are a lot of people saying this. I'm just in that camp. Right. And so, you know, and I mean, we can talk about this later, but that's one of the reasons why after OFFIX, I decided not to take VC money and do that.
So, okay. I just want to kind of close the chapter of what happened with your mom. So your mom got her health back. She came back.
So my mom, after a year or so, you know, I finally figured out her business. I got through that, and then, you know, she came home and went through physical therapy for a while, and kind of, you know, to the degree that she could, started walking more and getting that back.
Did she ever get back to work?
Yeah. So like, let's say 2 years later, you know, I had computerized everything, and, you know, I let her, she became a workaholic after that.
When she came out of that, do you feel that she was proud of you for handling things while she was down? Or she never conveyed that to you?
I think it was just expected.
Yeah.
It's the immigrant parent mentality, man.
Yeah, you got to take care of it.
You know, they were like, yeah, of course you did that. You were my son.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Okay.
I mean, like, you know, I'm sure a lot, especially Middle Eastern people will relate to me. They'll know that, like, your parents have, especially like from the old school parents, they have like really high expectations. And maybe that's another reason why I have high expectations for myself. You know, I never really thought about it. You know, obviously she understood that, you know, if I wasn't there, you know, none of that would have happened. But no, I you know, that's actually really interesting. I never like did things to get like a pat on the back from anyone. I did it for myself and challenging myself more. Yeah. And so when you're in competition with yourself, or you're not looking for your mom, your dad, your cousin, whoever it is, your best friend, to pat you on the back, you tend to do a lot better probably. So
I think that's I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
And I think people should, somebody who's listening to this right now, they should really pay attention to that. It's that you'll only get so far seeking external validation for the effort that you put into it. I think there's a cap to how far you can go, because like you can't control that external validation. Whereas when you're competing with yourself and you're getting that validation from yourself and from the results of your own efforts, I feel that removes the cap to what someone can accomplish.
I'll give you two examples of that are really interesting, and we'll get to it. But when I dropped out of medical school, if I were to have listened to other people and wanted to validate from other people, even people I respected, I would have never done it, right? And my path would have been completely different. I would have been probably an underappreciated, underpaid, and overworked doctor, right? This is the truth. And the other time was when I started easy texting. And I remember one of my family members, I was so proud of making this thing, and it was Shabbat. I remember we were having a Shabbat dinner,
Yeah.
and I like brought the computer and I showed them how, you send a text message and it like opens and it's like, and they got, and then they looked at me and they were like, so how much do you charge? And I'm like, oh, we charge like, I don't remember, 5 cents a text.
Yeah.
And in Farsi, they were like, get out of here, man. You're talking about 5 cents, 10 cents. Go and get a job where you're making millions of dollars.
Sure.
And if I had really internalized that to get validation, I would have never built that company, which, right now is probably doing, I don't know, 100 million in ARR, something crazy like that.
Sure. And
right?
you sold that company successfully.
I did sell that company, and we made a lot. It was like a crazy business that made like, a lot of money.
Good for you.
It was a SaaS business that made 70% margins. It's unheard of.
No, I know. But listen, the people, like your family members who were advising you at the time. So I think that's one little piece of advice is like, don't run to your family members and start showing them what you're doing.
You should go and run to people who have done what you're doing successfully.
Yeah.
Never look to someone else's validation or idea who hasn't done what you're trying to do. In 1999, when I quit my $30,000 a year job, 30,000 Canadian. Yeah. Okay.
And I was living in a basement apartment and driving in like an 86 Chevy. When I did that, I remember my father telling me, you're crazy. You're crazy to quit your job and start a business. Like, you're secure right now. He said, do a business like in the evenings, like, and I said, I can't. Like, if I do something in the evenings, it's never going to take off.
You got to go in all in.
And he said, but how are you going to pay your rent? He's like, what if you fail? I said, but what if I succeed? But that's a whole other story, my dad. But okay.
Yeah.
So,
again, but it's true. If you wanted validation from your dad, your path would have been severely altered. You wouldn't be sitting here talking to me right now.
Absolutely not. I think my dad, once I was like, in his mind, I was successful because I actually graduated from university with like a bullshit degree in geology. But the fact that I even was able to do that, he was shocked. And he said to me, he was a realtor. So he said, we're going to be partners. You're going to go. But his idea of being partners was me delivering flyers to all of the homes.
And being his minion.
Basically. Okay. So you're in school. You finish with a degree in computer science. So I'll tell you the quick and dirty of it. So I got into medical school, early decision, after my sophomore year, because I took my MCATs really early, and I ended up, after giving my mom her business back, starting to work in web technology. I mean, this is like early 90s, right? Or mid 90s, right? And, that was really emerging, and no one really understood how to do it. There was like, even if you wanted to get a website done, it was like impossible. Right.
Now you have Squarespace and Wix and all this other stuff that you can do it, but you have to imagine that none of that existed. And, there was no like, you had to hard code HTML and stuff.
Oh, I remember.
And so anyway, I was working, my senior year, and I was making a lot of money.
You were working this was when you were the lead
my
senior
year of college, because I had a computer science degree. I started working because by that time I had already given my mom back her company to run. And so I started working in addition to going to school, because I'd already gone into medical school, so I didn't really care much at that point. But I was working at the same time as going to college, and I was making like, I don't know what, like a lawyer makes, which was like $300 an hour.
So you were working full time, or you were working?
No, part-time.
These is like contract work? Like these were direct clients?
I worked for, a bunch of guys that, were starting to do e-com and that kind of stuff. And, needed software programming, and I worked at NASA for one summer.
I saw that.
But I did that more for medical school than it was a biology program where they were.
So you were between. Okay, so you had your computer science degree. You eventually went to medical school. You're moonlighting.
Yeah. So after making all this money, and I think I saved up like $100,000 in that 1 year or something like that, just working part time. I went to medical school, right, the next year. And like 3 months into medical school, I'll never forget it, right? It was a Sunday, and I think it was like, I don't know if they still use this book. It's like Lippincot's Biochemistry. It's like the book that everybody studies first year. I was sitting there reading this thing on a Sunday while my roommate that was working at Goldman, right, was just coming in from partying the night before.
Yeah.
Okay, and he was my roommate, and he looked at me and he's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Right? He's like, "There's all these people making money in tech, and you know how to do it, like, you know." What are you doing?
Was that the turning point when he said that to you? And
He said that he planted the seed to me, and then serendipitously I got a call from someone who they needed a lead for this company called Convey.com.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And it came together, and they were like, you know, we'll pay you some ridiculous amount of money. And I called my mom, and I'm like,
I'm dropping out of medical school.
I want to leave medical school. And my mom was surprisingly cool about it.
Why? That doesn't sound like a traditional mom.
I think my other relatives and like my grandma and other things were not. But my mom was actually really forward-thinking person. And she was like, I trust you. Like,
Wow.
I had already kind of established it.
Well, yeah, after what you pulled off when she was sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for her, she's like, I trust you and I trust your judgment. And also, I was kind of like, it's a really big decision to make, because like basically everybody who was in my medical school thought I was batshit crazy, because just to get into medical school at that time, I don't know how it is now, is insanely hard, right? Especially to get into like somewhere like NYU. It's like all this fucking work you got to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, like the process of getting in and the MCATs and everything is very difficult. And you're just throwing all that away. I mean, once you're in medical school, it's not as bad, because like they don't let you like mess it up.
Yeah.
To you know, they don't want you flunking out of medical school, especially a good one. But, you know, I was like, well, I can always go back to medical school if this doesn't work.
Sure.
And I don't like it.
Sure.
Right? And so I didn't see like the downside to trying it. And I'll make some money during the time. And so I did that. I dropped out, despite like, you know, I think my mom telling me she trusted my judgment was the thing that kind of like.
If she had told you, Shane, absolutely not.
I don't know. That's a hard one to answer.
The fact that you can't answer the question right away to say I would have done it anyways leads me to believe that your mother did you a big favor.
She did.
But you earned it because you had already proven to be the man of the house since your dad passed.
Yeah, I think. Listen, that's why you have to be very careful what you say. You know, your words can alter someone's life,
Especially to your kids.
Sure. And it's actually, there's a book called The Four Agreements that talks about this a lot. It's a book I read every year, and you have to be one of the principles of it is, you know, be impeccable with your word, and so you know, you only say things that you really want to put out into the world.
Yeah.
Because if you say you're not, it's very. You could say the simplest, stupidest thing to someone, yeah, and really affect them a lot.
You know, I've seen that, and it's interesting because as you get older, you have to be really careful, because especially if you're older and you kind of at least have the appearance of having your shit together.
Yeah.
If you actually have your shit together,
people believe you.
Your words are super powerful. You know, I talk to young people all the time, and sometimes like they'll ask me a question and I won't even think it through, and I'll just tell them, yeah, you should do this, and then they go ahead and start executing, and maybe I shouldn't have given, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a scary thing. So I think once you get older and you have your shit together, you really have to be careful about what you say to people.
100%. You have to be really thoughtful and mindful about what you say to, you said it, especially your kids, and yeah, that's something that I work on all the time. No one's perfect, obviously, but so in any case, I did that, and it was super exciting. We were building basically the first blogging system when the word blog didn't exist.
So that's interesting to me, because when I read that about you, this was almost like, is it like a WordPress system? Like, is it something that competed with WordPress?
It's like WordPress. It's like WordPress, but you have, like, that didn't exist.
Right.
Right. So we called it an online publishing system.
Right. Well, I mean, essentially that's true, but
yes.
But who was was it publications that were now going digital? So let's say it was a traditional publication.
So that was the idea. It's like, you know, you had a magazine or you had content and you wanted to have a professional content management system, right?
You were going from like, let's say print to online, or you like, let's say that was the
idea that
magazine.
The founders had. I didn't have this idea.
Right.
So they recruited me.
No, I understand, but that's what you were doing. So you were, and then you weren't part of BizDev. You were doing.
No, I was executing the software.
I see.
Building the software to bring to life what their vision.
And the business model there, it was SaaS. That they would sell it to these publishers.
Yes. So you'd pay a monthly fee, and then you could paywall at that. I mean, they didn't have words like paywall, but what I'm saying to you right now is what is existing right now, right? But there was no word for paywall. We called it like, I don't know, you could sell a subscription.
Got it. I understand. Okay.
You know I get it.
And they had a sales team. They were probably funded.
Yeah. They were well funded. It was crazy town at that time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember.
I remember, but I was too busy building a real tech, but
it was like
a real business.
1999, 1998, 1999, 2000, right? Right before the bubble burst.
I remember it well.
And then so I built this system in like 6 months using, we had to use Cold Fusion because that was, it was like the quickest way to deploy, right? Even though like if you're a real like software engineer, you think it's like sacrilege to do something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did that, and then like, you know, after lunch, my roommate that was working at Goldman, that was one of my really close friends from high school, because I stayed in the same apartment. It was on Park Avenue and 36th Street at that time.
Yeah.
I stayed at the same apartment. Came to me and he's like, dude, all these people are making all this money. I have an idea with another friend of ours from college that went to NYU, and he said, look, I'll make the money, you make the software. There's this thing called Citrix out there, and we can create what's called an ASP, right? An ASP is an application service provider, which is what you call SaaS now.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Junebug you're talking about.
No, this is Offix.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Offix, yeah.
So I'm like, all right, I have like $100,000 saved or something, or, you know, like.
How did you have $100,000 saved? From your employment income?
I just, so my senior year, I had worked, senior year of college, I had worked part-time, that I had saved up all that money. Wow. Remember I told you that and then, and so, you know, after leaving medical school, I had never spent that money, and I made some money at this other company too. And so he's like, all right, I'll put in that too, and we have another guy who'll come in, and then we'll raise. And I guess people were dumb enough to give like 3 22-year-olds, you know, $2 million or something like that to start a company. Yeah. And we did it. We actually did it. In 1 year, we built basically what you would call Microsoft 365 now, right? But it was all Windows based. So like you would log into a web portal. We had an app store, even though we didn't call it an app store. You could find the apps you wanted, like Word, Excel, Exchange, my Outlook, QuickBooks, whatever it is that you wanted, and you would buy it. You pay a monthly fee for it, and we didn't have the word SaaS. We called it utilitizing computing. Like you pay for your compute like you would pay your utility bill, right? And, you know, we would host your files like Dropbox. So you'd save your files on our servers, and, you know, you could give all the people in your business, your small to medium sized business, these apps, and they can use it whenever they want it, and it gets upgraded automatically because it's really being run on our servers, right? It was like the internet was like one giant mouse, keyboard, and monitor cable, right?
So what happened with that? How long did you do that for? So
we did that for almost 2 years before the dot-com bubble burst, and then 9/11 happened, and funding dried up. This is a classic thing that people are coming to right now, right? We were way too early for our time. So maybe like a lot of the Web3 guys will kind of relate to this,
Yep.
right? You know, like they're solving problems that people aren't ready to solve yet.
I think they're solving problems that people don't know they have yet.
Yes, they don't exactly. People didn't know, like they were so used to the licensing model.
Yeah, like
you know,
CDs and all
yeah,
this.
yeah. And so there was a lot of other issues with like broadband penetration and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So anyway, we were way too early for our time. It was a brilliant idea, like in retrospect, but people have brilliant ideas that are too early for their time all the time.
What was the issue? The issue is that you couldn't get to scale fast enough?
Yeah, we couldn't get enough customers to become
Right.
like break even.
Sure.
And
Well, you wouldn't have needed to in that scenario before the bubble burst. You wouldn't have needed to even break even. You could have just been showing any kind of scale, even if it wasn't profitable.
yeah, we were scaling, but then just like now, the situation changed.
Yeah.
The market changed. Like all the public companies went bankrupt that were like pets.com and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. And, our investors wouldn't give us the rest of the money. It was a long story, but suffice to say that it didn't work out. And, for my friend from Goldman, I think he's working at 0.72 now. He's doing well for himself. He went to another hedge fund or something like that. And, I was out of the job. Right. This is another issue, right? That where your back's against the wall.
Yeah.
Out of the job. No one wants programmers anymore because the dot-com bubble burst. Yeah. So programmers used to be a hot commodity getting paid a lot of money, and now no one wants them. And to some degree that's happening now. You see like Facebook and Google and all letting go of all these tech guys. Yep. I'm sure they're getting absorbed by these other companies that could never hire them before now, but you'll start to see the overflow of that happening too. And so at that time I had a girlfriend and she was going to FIT, and she was working the door at like a couple of the nightclubs.
So now we're getting into the nightclub thing.
Yeah.
And hence the genesis of your book.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, it was a long drawn out.
No, not at all.
To get
no,
here.
that's the point of this. I want to understand how you got here.
So in retrospect, if you ever told me when I was a kid that I would be in the nightlife business, I would have thought you were bananas.
No, but here's the interesting thing. You just touched on something. It was your girlfriend at the time who was very social and she went out a lot, and she was the one who got you into that.
Well, no, she actually was doing the door at a couple of nightclubs just to make money to, on the side.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I had nothing to do, right? Like it was the first time where I had nothing to do. I wasn't going to school. I wasn't I was embarrassed to tell my mom. I don't even think I told my mom at that point, because I still had some money left over. I was like pretty much broke, but I had some money.
Yeah.
We even moved in together or something to save money and that kind of thing.
With your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I was going out and I was watching what was going on. I wasn't like going out and getting drunk and like buying tables. First of all, there were no tables at that time, but there was a totally different scene in New York. But, I wasn't like going out and getting drunk and depressed. I was like hanging out and watching what was going on around me and watching how people were making money and that kind of thing. And everything seemed backwards. All the marketing, people giving out flyers. They had list girls going around taking phone numbers and names so they could call you the next week and tell you to come to the next party. And there were a lot of inefficiencies and craziness going on. And coming from the world of computers and everything that I had done, I knew what the possibilities were there was like Time Out magazine, but there wasn't even a place to go and look and see where to go on what night or what events were happening. Right. It was a totally different.
It was very word of mouth.
It was word of mouth. You had to be invited by like a club owner or a promoter or restaurant owner or whoever it is that was in the know. And no one, it was not like public information, right? And so the idea came to me one night. We were walking, at that time I was living like in Sutton Place, which was like 58th between 1st and 2nd. Mm-hmm. And there's the Queensboro Bridge that goes from Manhattan to Queens. And underneath the arches of that bridge, there was this brand new restaurant called Gustavino's that that had just opened. It was like huge. It was vaulted ceilings, and I mean, the guy had probably spent like, his name was Terrence Conran from London.
Yeah.
He's, I don't know if he's still around though, but he was a big restaurateur, and he spent like, I don't know, $10 million building this place. And there was nobody in it. It was like the most beautiful place I had ever seen in Manhattan, pretty much at that point. And I looked at my girlfriend and I'm like, how is it that no one is doing a party here or events here? It makes no sense. And I'm like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do an event here because this is incredible. And everyone.
What year was this?
Maybe 2001.
Okay.
2001 or 2002.
Right.
Actually, I should know because I found the invite for that thing. And I'm like, and you know what? We're going to do it on Halloween because it was like coming up to Halloween. It was definitely 2011, 2001 because it was right after 9/11.
Okay.
It was right after 9/11. I'm like, there's this pent up sadness in the city. People want to get out and start over. Halloween is a night that everybody goes out. We're going to do something creative. We're going to make these invites that are actually credit cards that have a mag swipe on the back. It's in the book. Okay. So all of them I'm telling you is in the book. And suffice to say, we did this event and like we made like 150 grand or something crazy in one night.
Come on.
No, I swear.
You mean back then now it's a lot of money, but back then that was.
Yeah, there's a lot to what went into it to get it to that, and it's detailed in the book, but that's when the light bulb went off, right? I'm like, wait, if I do 100 grand and I do 10 of these a year,
it's $1 million. Yeah,
that's $1 million.
Yeah,
it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
right? Especially at 24 years old, and at that time, right? $1 million 26 years ago was a lot more than $1 million now.
Sure.
So I'm like, wait, this can become a real business. And then, it evolved into how do we build this database? So through that whole thing, we had built a database of like 5,000 people.
Partygoers.
Partygoers. And through my tech and setting up no one had set up a website or sent email. There was no MailChimp. There was none of that, right? We had to build all those tools internally later on. And just to kind of shorten it a little bit, I realized that there was this inefficiency and none of the club guys had these tools or these ways of marketing or even selling tickets online. There was no Eventbrite. There was none of that, right? Ticketmaster would only do it for big tickets, ticketing stuff. And so we grew that business and we did our own events too. So we were eating our own dog food, but we were at the same time selling the same stack of tools to other promoters and club owners. And then
that were competing with you.
That were competing with us, but we were giving them the same technology. And we created a website that basically had, and I realized that the one thing that really drove the database growing at that point, and again, there was no Facebook at that time.
Yeah.
Right? There was no social media. Was taking pictures and buying these, like, I don't know, at that time, digital cameras were like $2,000.
Yeah.
Right? So we bought a bunch of these digital cameras, hired photographers to go to the clubs, take pictures, and give you a card saying go to the website.
I remember those. We had them in Toronto too.
Yeah. There was a lot of people who started doing this. I think we were one of the first ones to do it. But a lot of people ended up doing this.
And the photos would be posted to which site?
To Junebug.
To Junebug. So it would be to your domain.
Yes, and then people would come in and they'd have to give us their birthday, their gender, their all this. So like,
because nobody was taking pictures because they didn't have phones. They didn't have camera phones.
They didn't have camera phones, right? They didn't have what you have right now. So we would post it, and then we figured out a way to sell them online, sell the prints. And then, but really what people didn't understand, and to some degree, Facebook, Zuck understood this. It wasn't the people, it was the data. Yeah. The data was making us tons of money because we were figuring out how to do events and target it to the demographic in our database.
Sorry, when you say the data was making you money, this was data that you were accruing from all of the events, including
All-
your competitors' events.
Exactly.
Okay. So then once you had the
No,
database,
sorry. So when they were selling tickets through our system, we wouldn't talk. It was through really the photos and also listing other people's events, and people knew that we were like the source to find out about events. So you would come on our website.
sorry, but what was your monetization model? It was the
So-
events themselves?
So we would monetize through sponsorship. So we had Mercedes and Johnny Walker
Yeah.
getting both digital ads and offline on our
Like point
experiential
of point of
stuff.
sale or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, at the events itself. So we would do, so like Johnny Walker wanted to do tastings for like, I don't know, 30 to 35-year-old males in New York City, right? Like, who can target someone like, no one was able to target.
And this
like
was all
that.
through email.
All through email. And online email, you know, we knew also, like, we were doing pretty sophisticated stuff. We would, you know, show you banners if we knew who you were for particular stuff.
Show you banners on Junebug.
On Junebug when you
Right.
were coming on, and people, we were getting tons of
Junebug,
traffic.
Junebug was a hub, like it was a consumer facing
Yeah.
site.
Yeah, we even created a dating
wow.
portion of it that was doing really well at that point.
And it was exclusively for New York.
No, then later on we got to LA and Miami,
Wow.
and we started rolling out other cities. But it never quite got as big as New York.
No, well,
but I don't think
But
anywhere.
no other city is quite as big as
Yeah,
New York.
I mean, our database got up to 1 million people. It was crazy.
Well, that's massive penetration considering the population of New York City.
And also it was like, so it was also tourists, right? And also like, no one had this elusive demographic of young urban professionals that have money to spend, disposable income, like to go out. And so those brands like Mercedes and I don't know, we had a bunch of them.
Some liquor brands.
Liquor
stuff.
brands and luxury brands and that kind of stuff wanting to get in front of, right? And then we would do events, right? Just like Halloween and New Year's is the biggest night that everybody, and that's what we realized also is like, we just need to focus on like 2 or 3 big nights to make all the money. And, you know, a lot of promoters, they go weekly and they're like sitting with bottles and.
But they had something, sorry, I apologize for interrupting
Yeah.
because I want to point this out. You had a massive competitive advantage, and that was your understanding of technology and your ability to execute the creation of the technology and apply it to these millions of people who you had registered. Whereas a typical promoter doesn't have that.
No, they have their phone.
They have their phone, they have their personal contacts, and they can do parties. So for you took the like on the demand side is you have these millions of people or however many
I just
people.
scaled that concept.
Right.
I just
and
scaled that
so
concept.
you were selling I guess licenses for the use of the software.
Yes.
Because when I read your bio, you know, I talked about like there was a long list. Just for the sake of time, I
Yeah.
shortened it to put. I think it was like the email piece I put in, and I forgot what else I read out.
Yeah,
but,
like ticketing and
emails and ticketing. But you had much more than that.
We had a lot more internal tools that we were using, and eventually we would give it to other people, and that was the genesis of the next business,
Which was easy texting.
yes, because
sorry, let me say it because
Yeah.
because I remember living through this, and when I was reading this about you, when I was researching you, it really hit home for me because email inbox penetration, I mean, it just fell off a cliff because, you know, it all became web-based, meaning like it was like Gmail and Hotmail, and they started building these, you know, these spam filters and whatnot. And I had a daily deal site in 2012,
Yeah.
and I ran into the same thing.
like Groupon.
I competed with Groupon back
Yeah.
in 2012. So I completely understand. And it's amazing what you did because when that happened to me and inbox penetration fell off a cliff, it happened to everyone in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you now that our site, ours was called DealFind. It was mainly in Canada, and Groupon and Living Social and all these other guys.
Yeah.
They didn't do what you did because you actually, instead of just, you know, kicking back, because it was around the same time, it was like 2012, you know, instead of just kicking back and kind of saying, well, you know, shit, you know, we'll call it a day, our business is going down because we now can't get our offers to these people.
Yeah.
You went and created a whole new business
Yeah.
with texting. And
Yeah.
that was because of your understanding of technology and being able to program.
Well, yes. And again, my back was against the wall because I knew like that was our lifeblood. That's how we sold tickets to our own events.
To get to the people. To
To break through.
Was there no texting platform?
So yeah, no, that's the interesting part of it is that at that point I was like, oh my God, we have everyone's phone number.
Yeah.
How do I text them? And, by that time it was like 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And there was, constant contact, and that the ESPs were out there, the email service providers.
Sorry, Constant Contact provided texts?
No, they didn't.
They did
emails.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there has to be something like that for texting, right?
But there wasn't.
And I was super surprised, and I'm like, oh, I got to figure out how to do this. And it took me a good month to figure it out because
Sorry, Shane, I'm laughing because I'm so not a tech guy, meaning but I've been in the tech business since 99, and I've always had to rely on, vendors or partners or somebody who knew the tech. But when you say, oh, it took me a month to figure out how to send out mass texts from scratch.
No, sorry. Let me rephrase that. It took me to technically understand how to do it, because texts are going through the telecom system.
Right.
They're not going through the internet. So it's fundamentally different.
Correct.
And so just to understand how to possibly do it is I didn't build the system in 1 month.
No, but even how long did it take you to build the system?
The alpha version took a few months. Yeah. But
I'm still laughing.
It was very rudimentary. It was very rudimentary.
I know. So who built it? You built it?
So initially, I built it because we had found a white label solution, but it was really shitty, just to be honest. And I had to redo it. And I had to figure out how to actually mechanically do it. How do you get into the system? People know the company Twilio, or,
sure.
This is like, Twilio enables developers to do this seamlessly. They have an API to do this. This is like 4 years before Twilio even existed, right? Mm-hmm. There was no simple solution, right? I was the first API in the United States for texting, not Twilio.
Did you ever raise money for easy texting?
I didn't. So just how I bootstrapped Junebug, right? I didn't take VC money. This is another lesson. It's because when everything was going down with Offix, our investors were like complete assholes to us. Like, I had literally put my blood, sweat, and tears into building something like this. And they were like blaming us and telling us how they lost $1 million. And I swore to myself that I would never take someone else's money to do stuff.
Do you know why they were blaming you?
Because there was no one else to blame.
No, but I can tell you specifically why they were blaming you. They were blaming you because they have institutional investors who they've convinced to put money into their fund, and then when they go to you and they deploy that capital into you, when they have to go back and tell these institutional investors that we've lost money, or you're not getting a return, or you're not getting a sufficient return,
they can't blame themselves.
They're not going to say, well, we're the idiots.
Yeah,
they're going to say, oh, it was the entrepreneur.
Yeah, that really it's ironic because I'm a VC now, right? And I back a lot of startups, and I like early stage startups, but I think that unique perspective of what I went through differentiates me a little bit. Not that I'm the only one that's done that's a VC now too, but I think founders liked, and this is the reason why I wrote the book, is because I would constantly find myself when I'm backing a new startup that I want to spend time with the founders, telling them the same stories over and over again, which I compiled into this book because it needed to be like coherent. Yeah. Right. And what's interesting about the book, and I rewrote it because I didn't initially write it this way. I then rewrote it with the help of my sister-in-law, who's a very smart, 2-time Emmy Award winning, producer, TV producer. Okay. I rewrote it to have this section in the end where each chapter is a lesson that I learned, and the stories around it is how I use that lesson later on in easy texting, or right now how I use it as a VC or in real estate or whatever it is that I'm doing. Because I think when you connect the two, it helps other people connect to what they're doing right now and like find a path, right? Mm-hmm. Or solution for whatever issues they're having or problems.
As a VC, how involved are you with your entrepreneurs?
So sometimes I'm just a check because they don't want me to be thing. And I'm just like happy to be along the ride, especially with like really good founders
Sure.
that have been doing it for a while. Like for Sandbox, like I have I mean, you're talking about Jack Hittery and
Sure.
Eric Schmidt and these guys
Yeah.
that like, I mean, like I could never, I mean, the guy wrote the book on quantum computing.
Thank you, by the way, for offering that to me and getting me into that.
Listen, I try to bring my friends in. I mean, I'm the big believer in growing the pie,
Sure.
and bringing everyone up with you. I just hope it does bring us up. It doesn't.
Listen.
But anyway, so sometimes I do that, but other times, spending a lot of time with early stage guys that are either doing something in the realm of what I have expertise in. So I have one company called ResiDesk, which interestingly, they figured out through AI for residential property owners to insert themselves into your email system and your communication system and figure out the sentiment of your tenant and send them a text message with a link to leave a review for your building.
Oh, wow.
At the most optimal time when they'll give you the best review.
Wow. And that's SaaS that's being offered to
multifamily owners
yeah.
and property managers, right? And that's a problem that, like no one's ever thought of, right? Like who thought that like Google reviews of a building make of like, a rental building
in terms of getting tenants and retaining tenants. And,
but it makes a huge difference.
Sure.
And people read those reviews and they're doing phenomenally well. And now, I mean, after 3 years, right? It was a struggle for them too. So there are some like that where I talk to them on a much more regular basis and I advise them to the degree that they want advice. And so the simple answer is it matters. It matters if they want it, if I want it. But so sometimes I do, I'm very involved and sometimes I'm not.
Do you find yourself, especially with the younger entrepreneurs, mentoring them like almost on a personal basis, or do you don't get that close to the deals?
I have. There's a few of them that I have, mentored them in terms of how to think about things, and especially, I'm kind of contrarian like you in thinking. Listen, just don't like build the best product. Get it to a point where it's making money, right? Because as an entrepreneur, when you're at ease and your thing is making money, your business is making money, you make better decisions, in my opinion, because you're not stressed out about how do I pay the bills tomorrow. And you want to do that as quickly as possible. That's my point of view. There are a lot of people who take a different point of view about that, but that's what worked for me. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do it.
For sure.
So
I want to get back to kind of the chronology. So Junebug is going.
Yeah.
You realize the need to create.
It's like 2005. I see like now every promoter, every club owner, every, I don't know, band, every whatever has their own email list.
Yeah.
So now we're not the only game in your inbox. We're like one of 100.
Right.
And we got to get through spam filters. And you have to understand, I had built my own entire system of how to, with servers of how to send these emails out, right? Because we started.
There was no MailChimp or
right. We could have switched at that point, but I already had the system in place.
Yeah. So
I'm like, how do I do this? And, I had a BlackBerry at that time.
Yep.
And I'm like, what? Well, people are texting. How do I send this text? And, I figured that out and I built an alpha version. I sent a text out for one of our Halloween parties, and pretty much every club owner and promoter is on our list too. They get the text message.
100% inbox penetration.
Dude, it was insane.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, I don't even know how to, it's in the book. It was insane. I mean, the response, the open and response, it's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right? Especially then. Now you have like junk filters on your iPhone and stuff. But, so then all of a sudden the club guys are calling me and saying, how did you send that text message? How do I do that? Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, the light bulb went on, right? This, we can, just like how we had been selling other parts of our thing, I'm like, you know what, this time, this is big enough, I think, that it's not just for like nightclubs, right?
It's for everybody.
This is for everybody should be. What's interesting is later on, our three different types of clients that were the biggest were the nightclubs, because they're early adopters, churches,
Wow.
and schools.
Schools? Who were schools sending it to?
To parents and emergency texts and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Right? You never in a million years would I have guessed that. Right? But I started with the customers that we had, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to build a real version of this. And initially the version was, we send you a sign up form, you sign up, and it was like $100 a month or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you got a certain amount of text messages with $100, and you have to sign that, put it in your credit card, and fax it back to us, I swear, right? 2006.
How did you scale 50,000? You must have automated it at some point.
The first 100 or so, I was on the phone selling it, right? Or like the first 20 or something came automatically because they were like, we want to do what you just did,
sure, yeah.
Right? We have a database of phone numbers. We want to do this. They used to call with call girls. Remember the call girls going around with the sheets and everything? And so the first 100 people, I had to figure out when I was cold calling. I think this will be interesting to anyone who's listening. I quickly figured out the only way to sell this thing is to have like a 1 or 2 sentence hook that piques someone's interest and gets the point across. Mm-hmm. If you can't explain what you're doing in 1 or 2 sentences...
You're talking about to the customers of Easy Text.
To the customers, yeah. to cold calling new customers, right? If you cannot, in 1 or 2 sentences, give your value proposition and what you're doing, then you need to go back to the drawing board. So I had built all these like emails that were paragraphs long and show how it works and diagrams. Dude, at the end of the day, the one thing that worked the best is, hey, I built a system that can automatically capture your customers' phone numbers that come into your club, and you can send them text messages the next week or the next. Do you want to see it? Yeah, I want to see that. Was it exactly perfectly correct?
No, of course.
No. I mean, they probably thought it was some machine that magically, like, your phone would go by it and it would take your phone, right? Yeah. But it got me to demo them. And then when I demoed them and they got the text message on their phone, it was visceral for them, right? The thing buzzed in their hand.
You actually went to meetings at the nightclubs and presented this to
No,
them?
I would get them on the phone. So sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing right now.
Face-to-face?
Yeah. I think like if you look at a lot of the founders, they're not willing to do that. They want to like Zoom. They want to.
Never mind the founders. Salespeople aren't willing to do it.
We get up and go and walk into an office, get rejected. You know how hard that is?
It's a bit of a different time now, but I remember in my early days, all of my businesses in the beginning, it was me. It was like, put on my shoes, got in my car, 100%. Went to meetings, got stood up. People didn't show up, especially in the nightlife industry.
Get kicked out. Tell them I'm crazy. Who are you? What are you? But the thing that worked the best was somehow getting them on the phone, telling them this, or emailing them, and then getting them on the phone and having them log in and demo and get text, send themselves a text message.
That's it. That was that magic.
So that's when the light bulb went off in their head, being like, oh, I get how I can use this.
Yeah.
And they connected how their business could use this themselves.
For sure.
And usually 95% of the time, if I could get someone to demo, I closed them. But then we realized to scale, it has to be self-serve, right? And so we spent a lot of time building a self-serve model. And the alpha and beta version was just very simple. You could just like upload a list, send a text, and then just get the responses. And those are the 2-3 things it could do, right? And it didn't even do it elegantly or nicely or beautifully or anything like that. But, I was doing like within the first couple of months, like $30,000 a month in revenue.
And it was the way you were charging was a combination of a monthly fee plus a fee per text? that was sent out?
Yeah. So it was like you paid $100 and you got a certain amount of text in your plan, and then overage. I mean, I was just taking cues from. I wasn't reinventing the wheel.
Sure.
I was looking at how Constant Contact charges or whatever, and I just used them as a model.
Yeah.
Or the phone company, right? The phone companies, you know, at that time you were paying 10 cents a text, so 5 cents was cheap.
Yeah.
Right. And anyway,
so 2 years into it,
you
sold Junebug.
So yeah, I was doing both of them at the same time, and I quickly realized that, you know, this was easy texting was a better business, right? The events business, although it had a media arm to it, you know, social media was coming in, starting to nip at our heels. People had camera phones, so that trick was not working anymore. And so I kind of saw the writing on the walls, and I'm like, do I really want to be an events business? And what is an events business worth? 1x, 2x, maybe? Because you got to redo that event every year.
Yeah.
Right?
Look, I think it's good for money today. I think it's good for short term. But I guess the challenge with that, which is like a lot of businesses that are profitable from the beginning, is that they don't have long-term enterprise value.
No.
And that's what you saw in easy texting.
Yeah. I'm like, this is a SaaS business. People are going on plans, recurring revenue. Absolutely. This is worth a lot. And I also saw the total universe of businesses using this as being really big. And I actually just, all I had to do was look at Constant Contact and MailChimp.
No, it's a no-brainer.
Look at how much they're worth.
For sure. Billions. They're worth billions.
Yeah. They're public companies and stuff. And I mean, MailChimp sold for, I don't know, whatever, 7 billion or whatever to Intuit or something. I mean, that's granted, that was like 25 years later, but
still,
I mean, still they were very profitable before that. So anyway, so I came to the conclusion, and also we had been doing it for 10 years at that point. I was tired.
Sure.
I wanted different things in my life, and so did my girlfriend was my ex-girlfriend at that time, because we broke up, you know, quickly after the business, and that's a whole other story.
But you still were in business together.
Yeah, we were smart enough to not want this to end.
Sure.
And we both realized that we better be grown-ups about this.
Yep.
Or we're going to give up a beautiful business that's going to make us a lot of money. And so, you know, we were friendly to each other, but, you know, we weren't girlfriend and boyfriend. And, you know, we wanted to get married, we wanted to do all these other things. And it's very difficult to be in events and do that. It's just not conducive.
Absolutely.
So, so that's when
So you sold Junebug.
We sold Junebug. Then I took my portion of that, and
of the proceeds.
And I used it, and I also did a lot of other things. I got a second mortgage on my house.
Wow.
You know, I did a lot. I saw.
You really believed in it.
Yeah, and I saw. Well, listen, I was 2 years into it too.
Yeah.
Right, and I saw the growth. I saw how explosive it was. I understood where it could go, and I saw that people just like MailChimp, you know, doing blog posts saying that people will never use text messaging and no one will want to text. You know, it's spam.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God. Thank God that's what he was saying. Because if he didn't think that, I mean, if MailChimp rolled out text messaging when I was doing it, I would have been crushed.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that's...
So how long, okay, so 2 years into it, you sell Junebug. Now you're only on easy texting. You leverage everything. You mortgage everything.
So we're growing that business.
How long after that did you sell easy texting?
So that was around 2006, 7, and 2014.
Okay. Was that life-changing for you, that transaction?
Psychologically, yes. As a matter of fact, probably no. Because my business was making a lot of money, just in truth of it. It was very weird because no one could understand how I was running such a big business with just like 20 employees and making, I don't know, I think when we were sold it was doing like 15 million in ARR or something like this. And, you know, and it was like 70% margins.
Yeah.
Like,
that's crazy.
how is that possible? They just really didn't understand it. And I think it was a combination of a lot of things. One is, it was all the experience that I had from before. And I took a lot of the good people from Junebug that came with me.
Yeah.
So some of those people were with me for like 15, 20 years, across Junebug and Easy Texting. So I had the team, I had the experience, I had the scrappiness to know that, it's different when it's your own money and you're spending it versus a VC giving you money and that money not being yours. You think 10 times before you spend.
But hold on a second. So you never took VC for it?
I never took VC.
When you sold it, you owned 100% of it?
I owned like 99% of it, 98%.
You had like stock options for your...
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
There were some people that I just gave it to them.
Wow, good
They
for you.
didn't really have it. I just gave it to them.
No, I understand. So, okay. So, wow. And that
it was the right thing to do. So like...
You felt it was better to sell it then rather than stick around because you felt like there's this constant threat of like MailChimp and Constant Contact doing a text platform.
There was that. There was talking about your back to the wall. There was telecom is a very litigious. Had I known this, I maybe wouldn't have done it. Right, litigious business.
Okay.
And so there was a couple of things that happened where I almost lost the business during that time. One is, I guess there was like a spam problem, and they started doing class action lawsuits against these unwanted spam texts, right? And they were not only suing the guys that were sending these texts, but suing the service
platforms,
provider, the platform. And so, those are really expensive.
That's scary. But couldn't you? I mean, truth be told, were they opt-ins?
They were.
Okay, so then what was the problem?
Because just defending yourself and the threat of if they win I don't know $100 million class action,
it wipes you out.
I mean, it'll bankrupt you.
Yeah, it wipes you out.
Just because it's like true doesn't mean that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely.
So
I learned that much more now that I live in the United States than in Canada.
So I had to do some crazy things like go and petition the FTC and like go to Washington and learn how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Again, back to the wall. Don't know how to do it, but you have no option. I mean, I was like, who was I to be sitting talking to the commissioner of the FCC, to get an exemption, because like fax service providers like eFax had an exemption. Yeah. Because sending spam faxes were a problem too.
Right, I remember, yeah.
So there were a couple of issues like that, and then the telecoms themselves blocked us a couple of times.
Oh wow!
And I had to end up suing T-Mobile, winning. Getting
so
that
in the light of all of this kind of, in the light of these challenges, selling was the best option.
Look, it's a great business now, and it's much bigger than when I sold it. So in retrospect, there was two ways to look at it. On a monetary side, should I have sold it? Probably not the best decision, because it's a much bigger business right now. And, only now people are understanding the power of text messaging.
Sure.
I mean, look at how long it took people to understand the power of email.
Sure.
Right? Those guys have been around for a really long time.
How about social media? You don't have to look far, right?
Yeah, social media.
Even now, now people are I think it's growing. I mean, it's good for me because I'm in that business, but it's growing exponentially because the acceptance, the naysayers are now accepting, saying, okay, yeah, that's where the attention is. That's where everybody is. Yeah. Yeah.
So look, it's actually funny because when I was in the process of selling it, a lot of people would poo-poo my company, even though it was like, I don't know, generating shit tons of cash. They were like, oh, text messaging is old, tech, push notifications is the right thing or whatever. Yeah. And I'm like,
yeah, but you need to have an app installed for that.
Yeah. Text messaging is a universal app.
Absolutely.
It's on every phone. It has penetration everywhere. Right. But again, this is the whole thing is, you can't let other people's views skew yours, right? And I was told, at that point, I was actually in conversations with the CEO of not MailChimp, the other one,
Constant Contact.
Constant Contact, right? with constant. Her name was Gail, and she looked at me in this meeting.
They were considering buying you.
Yes, she looked at me and said to me, "This looks like spam to me."
Oh wow.
And I said to her, "Didn't someone say that to you when you were first starting Constant Contact? I could say that about your business. How is it that now that you're a big business and you're a thing, that all of a sudden something new comes out and you think it's spam? You're doing the same thing that someone else did to you."
What was her response to you? You put her on the spot. Good for you.
Nothing. I left. I realized that they're not the right people.
Right.
I didn't waste my time. I went to Boston. I remember it was in Boston or something like that. And I realized that this is like not the right fit. So you have to kind of have that confidence in you that you know what's right, but be flexible enough to have your mind changed when you see evidence otherwise, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's also too dangerous to be too rigid. It's this song and dance you got to play with yourself that's very hard to get correct, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay. So now that you've sold that, you're sitting on a meaningful amount of capital.
Yeah.
And what happens next? When did you meet your wife? Did you meet her after you sold the company?
No, I met her. I think I still had Junebug at that time. I met her.
Oh, so you've been together. You guys have been together for a long time.
Yeah, maybe like I met her about 14 years ago.
Okay.
14 or 15 years ago. We met, but I had sold quickly after that, like a few years after that.
And so tell me about the real estate, because you have, I mean, according to the information I saw, you have 20 properties that you manage.
Yeah, so some of that, because my mom passed, I inherited, obviously. And I know how to manage it because I was forced to manage it at that point. And what I was doing actually during Easy Texting is taking the money from that I was making and investing it in real estate, mostly in the Northeast, like New York and that kind of stuff. So I was getting that kind of experience.
Commercial, residential?
Commercial, mostly commercial. I did some small residential. I did some residential projects. Residential is difficult because it's very management intensive.
You have a multifamily?
Yeah, multifamily.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have really close friends that have really big funds that do that.
We were on the boat with them.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, they have like hundreds of employees, and like
Sure.
I wouldn't want to start like I just wanted to be a passive investor. Sure. And that's almost impossible to do with real estate. Anyone who tells you that, physical real estate, anyone who tells you that is lying to you, because anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and you'll be the one responsible.
You know, it's
for
funny.
It.
I was on a call today with my broker, who I'm trying to get a tenant for one of my properties this morning, and after this, I'm on a call with the broker from the other. Anyway, so I'm actively. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's your problem.
Yeah.
It's your problem, and you're gonna have to deal with it. And something breaks that you never knew even existed, and you know, there's crazy stuff that happens. So I got that experience from there, and to a degree, I still do that. When I moved to Miami 10 years ago, almost now, right? And so
to Miami, no,
right after I sold Easy Texting, yeah, in like 2014.
No, but you said you had been here 2 years ago. You moved here.
No, I moved here nine years ago.
No, but when we were talking before, you were saying when we met on the boat that day, you had just come here from New York.
No, when I met you in New York, I was just moving to New York.
I see. Okay.
So I was still living in New York, but we had already planned
Gotcha.
so I think we met in like 2013.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the first time we ever met, like 9 years ago, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was an interesting time too, because I had stayed on for a little bit to kind of help the acquirer, which was a strategic, and they were based out in LA.
So you stayed on with Easy Texting, from what I read,
for like a year. Yeah.
Okay.
For like a year,
and you were
to help with the transition.
But you were also doing M&A for them.
I did some M&A. I helped them buy another company too, because they were doing kind of like a roll up.
And did you, at that time, did you have any, if you don't mind me asking, did you have any earnout, or did you still have equity in it that got you to stay?
I had a very small earnout. It was very difficult for them to do something like that when you have a company that's generating a lot of cash.
Sure.
So like, why would I sell to someone to earn out the same cash I'm making right now?
Yeah, of course.
So like, the structure of my deal was very different than what you might see with other tech or SaaS companies where they're not making money. Mm-hmm. Because it was actually a very strange process, because nobody really knew how to value my company. They'd never seen something like
Right.
that, right? So it was almost like a PE deal,
Okay.
right? Because I wasn't venture backed, right? I was bootstrapped and I was making a lot of money.
But listen, I mean, they could have, I don't know what the SaaS multiples were back then. I mean,
It's not what it was now. I
No.
wish it was.
no, clearly. I mean, listen, I know people who sold in the last year at, 10, 12.
Yes. It was
On-
more like 7 to 9 at that point.
But that's still great. I mean,
yeah.
that's
It's,
still
I'm
amazing.
not complaining.
Yeah.
So, I think what would be interesting is the decision-making process of how I decided to sell at that point.
Okay.
So again, for me, Junebug was almost 10 years. Easy Texting was coming up to 8 or 9 years at that point, 8 years. So, people look at it again, 8, 9 years is a long time, right? Like to do something every day, all the time, constantly beyond. So that came into my focus is, do I want to be on like this for another 10 years?
Yeah.
Right. So that's one decision. I also kind of swore to myself that at that time, Diane and I were married, and we didn't have a child yet. We didn't have our first child, but that if I was going to have children, that I would be like a present
Sure.
parent. And if I had the means to do that, I would do it. But it would be almost impossible if I had Easy Texting. It's like
Yeah.
trying to get yourself off crack yourself. It's like you can't, right? I was addicted to it to a degree, and
You enjoyed it that much.
I enjoyed it. I felt responsible. It was my child,
Yeah.
right? It was just like any other founder will tell you. Like I had all these employees. I had to show up for them. It was making a lot of money. I didn't want to lose that,
Yeah.
right? Like there was a lot of incentives in place to keep me there, right? So to that degree, I came to the decision that, time is something I can't buy.
Yeah.
And when is enough going to be enough? For people, it's different, right? And I said, this number is enough for me.
Sure.
And for other people, it's not that number. So other people, it's a much lower number. For other people, it's a much higher number. But that was enough for me to say to myself, okay, like I could do with that and not have to go through the grind anymore of this. So that's how I came to that decision.
So what did you do right after you sell it? I mean, did you go back to work
So
right away?
I stayed for like a year.
But after that, after you were gone.
So then I realized that I needed to learn how to invest, because I see a lot of people who make money.
Yep.
And they give their money to some wealth manager they barely know,
Yep.
that has the wrong incentive structure to invest your money, because they get paid based on the products they sell you or a percentage of assets under management. So, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And they don't lose if you lose. They still make money.
I've never been a believer in it.
So I came to the conclusion that just like everything else that I had done, if I didn't know how to do it myself, how would I know if someone who's doing it for me is doing a good job?
Yeah.
And I took a unique approach to it. I think I found an asset manager that I really liked, but I said to them, here's the deal. I'm going to do this max 2 years with you. You'll make that money for the 2 years, and I'll pay you more. But I want you to teach me what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that I realized that my job now, I could make my job figuring out how to invest really, really smartly. And I'm still trying to figure that out because I mess it up all the time. But the key is to do better.
Sure.
Then you do more. Do more investments that win than lose, right? So
you only need a relatively small amount as a ratio of wins to make up for all the losses, right?
Yeah, well, in VC that works like that, but not necessarily in real estate and other things.
Right.
But I had to kind of really. it's a very hard thing to do, because just like being an entrepreneur, it's not just about being smart.
Yep.
Right? It's like, do you have the emotional fortitude? Do you have the willingness, the grit, all these other intangible things, right? Being a good investor is very much in the same way, because you have to be contrarian.
Yep.
You have to be willing to lose to win, which is a totally different mindset, and it messes with you. Because just even in VC, right? You play the odds game. You could have like 19 losses in a row and have that 20th one win and make up for all the losses and make you even a lot more money than you ever had. But imagine taking 19 losses in a row.
Yeah, no.
I mean, by the 10th one, you'll be like, I suck at this.
Right.
I shouldn't be doing this. Right. So,
but it's that, you know what it is? It's interesting, because I think it not only applies to investing, I think it applies to everything. When you're in business, a lot of people, they'll be in business and they'll see this slow growth, dips, and this constant struggle, and it goes on for years and years and years. And to me, I've always heard, I've heard the saying, and I kind of stick to it, is that I think the key to success in business is staying in business. So as long as you stay in business and you continue to iterate and keep your ear to the ground and, just continue to improve, that one day you will have that hockey stick. Like, you can grow in a linear fashion over a certain period of time.
You're absolutely
But then
correct.
one day, and you know where I apply that? Oddly enough, I apply that to the business I'm in today. So as you know, my main business is my wife's, I don't even know what you call it, social media, her personal brand. And we've built a team around that. And we've been experiencing like great linear growth in the last 7 years, with little spots of exponential growth along the way.
Yeah.
But I always tell Valeria, and I tell our team, is that I'm waiting for that hockey stick, because as long as we continue, something's going to happen where you're just going to not overnight, but in a short amount of time.
Yes.
But that applies to, I think, all business.
Compounding.
It's compounding. You're gaining experience. You're in the market longer. You're developing a brand, whether it's a personal brand or a business.
You're going to see that, it takes a long time to develop the experience of seeing between the lines and seeing that opportunity that no one else sees.
Look, you have to have a visionary. There has to be someone. Yeah. So here's what's interesting. Here's something that I kind of struggle with, and I'd like to get your take on it. Sure. Because I'm fairly certain you've had the same experience. When you're let's call it like the visionary of your endeavor, of whatever you're doing, whether it's in, whether you're a VC or any kind of business for that matter.
Sure.
And you're that visionary, and you have people who are either your partners or they're members of your team or whatever it may be. They're not visionaries. So I feel like there's always this contradiction between like, let's say myself, you're starting to smile because I think you have the same experience. And I think it's a common thing with entrepreneurs, where I see kind of what's going to happen, in 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, and like where we're going to be, but the team doesn't necessarily see it, and they're looking at operational kind of difficulties or challenges today. So how have you? They
can't make the gap. They can't cross the gap between what's happening now
and what's gonna happen.
Yes.
So first of all, do you agree with me that there is a contradiction between, like, let's say the singular visionary in an organization and the people who are day-to-day operational?
I think so. And I think that when I was running a business, one of the things that I was good at and maybe helped in to the degree of the success that I had was that being able to convince the people around me that my vision was correct.
Okay, so so first of all, you agree with me that there's a contradiction. Great.
100%.
So then my question to you is, how do you do it? I'm asking first of all for selfish reasons. I'm with our team, we're much better now. Yes. Especially with Valeria, because she was very young when this started. So she thought I was a lunatic from day one. Okay. So there was a lot of contradiction, and she's my wife.
Sure.
Okay. But I guess my question to you is, knowing that that's the case, and if you're an entrepreneur, if people who are watching this who are entrepreneurs, how do you reconcile that? How do you get? And I don't want to paint people who are in charge of operations in a negative light. I'm not. They're obviously they're brilliant people in what they do, but they don't necessarily see it. So what have you done in the past to?
So for me in particular, and again, I don't think that my way is the only way or the right way. It's just what worked for me.
Right.
So what worked for me is, first of all, showing everyone how committed I am to it. doggedly committed.
Got it.
To the point where even when we were making, I don't know, we had so many customers and making a lot of money, I would on the weekends do support tickets when there was no one around to do it. Like we had like 40 people working there,
leading from the front.
Yeah, like I would sit there. I didn't want a support ticket to be not answered that day.
Yeah.
For easy texting.
Yeah.
I will tell, all my employees know this because they would see it. They were like, holy shit, Shane just replied to like 50 tickets.
Yeah.
Right? And like solved problems for people. And it seems so stupid if you think about it, really. Like, I shouldn't be doing tickets, but I should, because that's showing that you truly believe in what you're doing.
Do you feel that gained the trust of your employees?
I think it made my employees work just as hard as I did.
Okay.
I not just build trust, but they were like going to be like answering those tickets on the weekend so that they could beat me to it. We had or this is like a stupid thing that there's a million other things like this that I could tell you. Like even to the tech part where like servers would go down and like I would get up at 4 a.m. and like, reboot the server or whatever that needed to be done. So to that degree, I think you need to show how much you're dedicated to this, to show that you believe this, right? The other thing is that you have to spend time, and it's very hard for people who have the vision to articulate what their vision is in a cohesive and comprehensive way, and not dismiss other people who can't see it immediately, right? And it's I follow this guy, Shane Parrish. He's actually Canadian. He runs this thing called the Knowledge Project.
I find that anybody who mentions Canadians to me always have to say he's actually Canadian. Yeah. I think it's to be polite.
Well, I can't believe he's Canadian. No, I'm just
Shane Parrish.
He wrote something really interesting. He said good writing leaves bad ideas nowhere to hide.
Okay.
Right? So I started doing this thing where I would send out a monthly newsletter internally. As the CEO, I wrote it. I didn't have someone else write it. And I started letting people know metrics that I look at. I started opening my books. Scary to let other employees know how much money is being made and stuff. Well, It's not novel. It's not novel. There are other people who do this.
Yeah.
And there are other companies that take this approach too. I'm not like innovating this in any way. But it was in my tone. I wrote everything. I incentivized people the right way. And I wrote what my vision is and what I did to further that vision this time, or what we're doing to further that vision. And when I started doing that, I think like 3 or 4 years before I sold, that's when things like really started to take off.
Sorry, when you started doing what specifically?
When I started doing this internal email to everybody, this internal like easy texting email about the company itself from my vantage point. There were parts of it that different departments like the developers and the marketing guys and the customer service reps and stuff would contribute to. But the majority of it was put together by me. And I was telling people, this is what we need. This is where we want to go. This is how we're doing it. And these are the people who are making it happen. Because they did this month and they did that this month.
And what was the frequency of this?
I did it monthly.
Oh, wow.
It was really difficult. Because I remember that newsletter would take sometimes 2-3 days.
Sure.
To write.
And what was the utility? What did it do for you?
It's funny because one of the things that I wanted, especially with easy texting, is to deploy all these features into the software, because I was a firm believer that, and the reason why we were able to be so lean in terms of headcount was because we were a product first company, and we were trying to solve ticketing, like support issues, through building a better product. So we thought, like, if you can build the product in a way that addresses all these support issues, you should technically not get people asking you for support.
Well,
Or minimize it to the degree that you
decrease
can.
it. I don't think you'll get rid of it.
Minimize it,
Sure.
right? And so there were so many things that we wanted to get done. And as a small company, even in a big company, there's like there's a bottleneck there, right? Like you can't just like do all of it at once. But I definitely saw, first of all, that the amount of features and updates that we were shipping was increasing in pace by like twofold at least, which was something that was very important to us, and it contributed to our bottom line and our growth. I saw, customer service reps, staying late, doing stuff that were above and beyond. I saw people coming in, and staying there and really like telling me that what I was doing was right, because they were like, oh, we got to hit this like number, right? Like they were in it with me at that point.
Sure.
It was a total game changer. I had already, like, I went from not being like kind of an opaque CEO, where people, just a few people that were there along knew really what was going on, and everybody was doing their function, to becoming like, hey, this is the whole thing.
And you found that people's just efficiencies, output, everything went up.
Yes. I think it's very hard to do that at scale. Like if you look at a Facebook or something like that, and like,
I'm sure Zuck is.
Yeah, I mean, he does these all hands meetings, and I've never had experience doing something like that. And I can't even imagine to say how you could do it. But, for an SMB that's doing, I don't know, between $500,000 and $5 million or $10 million in thing, which is there are a lot of companies that do this. If you want to grow, a lot of them are afraid to tell their employees about the internal workings of their company. And, if you lead with trusting people first, you'll be very surprised.
Yeah.
The default should be trust people. Don't distrust people.
That's a really, that's really interesting, because, on the other side of that, you have to worry about kind of data leakage. You have to worry about stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're really trusting people. I mean, the fact that they're all signed NDAs as part of their employment agreements.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't like giving people I was giving people numbers that
revenue margin,
EBITDA, that kind of stuff. I wasn't giving, and so what? Like,
you're right. You're right.
What are they going to do?
Okay. So now you have, is it a fund that you have and that you manage?
So now I guess it's kind of interesting. I think it's more like a family office that I have. I sometimes lead investments, and I bring other people who are strategic and smart around into the investments that I make as well. And I don't have a fund. Like, I'm not like a fund manager,
right,
where I get I'm not like making money off of like fees and stuff like that. Well, yeah,
because even the deal that you brought with Sandbox that you brought me into, the check was to, I believe,
it wasn't
you.
It wasn't that. It was more like, I get a little bit of a carry if you do well, but I'm not like creating a Neman fund to like go and do VC and stuff like that.
Well, you're not. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
In our community of friends, you're not I don't see you ever pitching
our
everybody.
Friends have like a fund that does real estate, right?
Yeah.
And like they don't pitch us, but like it's a great fund, and that kind of thing. I'm not doing that. What I'm doing more is finding things that I love and I'm passionate about, doing the due diligence on it. Really comprehensive from my vantage point of being a three-time founder with 2 exits or whatever, and the experience that I have, and then saying, okay, I like this company enough that I'm going to write a check for it, a significant check. And guys, you're part of my network.
Sure.
Here's all my diligence. You want to talk to me about it? We'll bring the CEO onto a Zoom. Everyone can ask questions. And that helps me in 2 ways. There have been times when I did that, and I have smart people in my network telling me, dude, this is really not good
Yeah.
because of A, B, and C. And I'm like, I never thought of that. You're right. And I didn't do that investment. So to a degree, it's a backstop to my blind spots.
Yep.
Right. And also, if everyone agrees and, people disagree with me all the time, but sometimes I think it's not valid. But
Sure.
if I find it valid and a good point, then maybe I won't do it. But if I'm doing it, other people want to join me and they see the vision and they come up with me in that thing. And it's also good and validating when I'm doing an investment that other people want to invest.
Absolutely.
And it also helps that company that I'm investing in.
Well, you saved me.
It's not look, altruistic, right?
You saved me because I came to you with an investment for a technology play, and I showed it to you, and you were nice enough to take your time to get on a call with the founders. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was like a data company, right?
Yeah. I don't want to say too much about it because I think there's still.
I do remember. Yeah. I remember something like that.
And I remember you telling me your concern about it, your concern, and it was really interesting, because I had never thought of the insight that you provided.
Yeah.
Your concern was, Gary, the worst case scenario isn't if they go out of business, if they lose, because if they lose, at least you can write off the loss.
Yes.
And you can recoup something from a tax perspective.
Sure.
Your concern was what if this becomes a lifestyle business for the founders and it never ends up declaring dividends and they just make their salaries forever. And you can't even write it off.
I have 5 or 6 of those. Right. And I've had these investments for 10 years.
And I've never even considered that as
they will
as something.
Never make money.
Right. And it's a good thing that I brought that to you. So are you still looking for deals? Are you actively looking for deals, or do you get deal flow?
Yeah. So last year was obviously a challenging year, and I didn't really do much. I tried to do something, actually a real estate deal. I was trying to buy the Marriott Residence Inn in the Atlanta airport, which I thought was a really interesting play because the airlines were doing very well at that time. A lot of the pilots were using this one property as their base, and no one was really looking at stuff like that. It's boring, right? It's not sexy and that kind of thing. But then interest rates started to go bananas.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first real estate deals where I tied up into contract, and I had some other people come in and invest with me, and I gave everyone back their money.
Oh, wow.
And I took the loss myself. I took a pretty big loss myself and didn't do the deal. I took a loss not to do the deal. I lost the deposit on the deal, which was a pretty significant deposit. But in retrospect, thank God I did that, because that property is worth, especially with interest rates what they are right now, a lot less than what I was going to buy it for. And everybody who I gave back their money to still remembers that.
Well, you created a lot of goodwill that way.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that if I had messed that up, no one would have wanted to come with me again. So I had to err on the thing. So there were some challenges last year. This year, it's like when it rains, it pours kind of stuff.
Lots of deals coming your way?
Yeah, I did some really interesting things. I like to do stuff with edge, not kind of, it has to have some sort of twist or edge to it. I did a company called Figure AI, which is Brett Adcock. He did, he's a 2-time founder. He did Archer Aviation that went public. He's building robots that are going to replace 3PL workers. So pick and packing, like Amazon style. So when you,
I know somebody else who had that idea.
Who? Sender? Yeah. So it's really funny because I introduced them, and he wants to be one of the first customers, actually.
Sure.
But it's a humanoid robot. So you have to understand that warehouses are made in a certain way right now that humans can access things. You'd have to retrofit an entire warehouse for a stick robot or one of these robots on rails to be able to do this. And it's very expensive and time consuming.
So it's better just to make a humanoid robot.
Exactly. That can have the dexterity, have real hands, and it can talk to the warehouse management system, because it's very specific, discrete things that it needs to do. Yeah. It's a very good application for robots, especially humanoid robots. So we've been doing that, and a couple other interesting.
Let me ask you, look, you're still a young guy. I mean, you're as mentioned, you're 46 years old. You still got a couple of decades, I think, if not more, left in you. What are your plans? Are your plans to scale up the the VC to? I don't think you want to be an operator again. I don't think you want to do a startup.
It's interesting. So I think I'm doing a lot of things I swore I would never do again.
Like what?
So I swore off New York, for example.
Just as a location, or
as a location to invest and that and to operate stuff and do real estate and stuff like that. And now I think it's at the most negative. People are very negative about New York. They think that there's a whole issue with office and that kind of stuff. But as I told you before, we have a mutual friend, Seth Greenberg, who's in the book too, and this venue, 130 Bowery, that's like Capital. And if you told me when we first did our first party there, with Junebug, that I'd be purchasing that property, I mean, it's a huge property, it's half a block in Bowery, that I would be in a position to buy that property ever, I would think you're it was never a thing. So I'm starting to do things that I think are super contrarian, right? That's a super contrarian thing. Every smart guy, like Blackstone's and the private equity, they're getting out of New York, and I'm doing the opposite, right? So I think now what I'm trying to do is see if I can win in places where other people think are losers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. No, look, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Shane, this was great. I really want to thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Listen,
this was awesome.
It's not everybody who wants to sit down and kind of, and go into such depth of their life and their business practices.
I felt like we were just hanging out.
Well, listen, it helps that you and I know each other and we've been friends for a couple of years. It definitely helps. But look, thank you very much. And kind of on behalf of the audience, thank you, because it's important that people hear these stories. I'm very passionate about this project in particular, because the people, if you only get to one person, especially the story about kind of your early life and the situation with your dad and your mom, if even one person who's going through a hard time can see you as an example of what comes out of the other end of this years later by sticking through, then you and I together have done a great deal of good for the world.
Listen, if I can help anyone, I try to all the time, but I think you're doing an amazing job. I've watched some of your other podcasts.
Thank you.
And I'm flattered that you would even ask me to be a guest in the first place. Thank you very much.
You knew I was going to ask you.
All right.
Thanks, Shane. Thank you.